everyone. Thank you for joining us once again here at Seafried and Brew for our weekly briefing. I am Jamie Sumner, Chief Analyst, and for this week's briefing, we just want to review over the Small Business Optimism Index, and then we'll look at some inflationary numbers that have come out over the past week. So overall, the Small Business Optimism Index went down to 104.7 from where it was back in February at 107.6. Now, while this is a decline, we still see this at a very high level. In fact, this is the 16th consecutive month that the index has been in the top 5% over its 45-year history. So we're still at a very optimistic level, and we can see that when we look at the trending chart going back. Here we have the election where Trump became president. The index jumped there, and it's remained above that level for a fair amount of time. And we did see this week or this month it come down to that 104.7, but overall it's still at a high level. When we look at the different components in here, we can see in March that all the components except for two were red, and those two that were green included plans to increase employment. That was up by 2 month over month, and then also the current job openings. And what we found is that this employment situation that we're in, that businesses, small businesses in particular, are having a difficult time finding the skilled labor that they need, or skilled employees that they need. But overall, when we look at the detractions here, we can see a big one. The economy to improve actually went down 11, and that's at 32% on the net. And then also the expect real sales higher came down, and we're only at 20% there. So overall, we did see these numbers declining here. So we'll look to future months and see if this is a trend where we continue to see this index decline, or if this is just an anomaly. It came down, it's going to pop back up. But when we look at some of the underlying numbers, I found this interesting, and this kind of goes to that fact that employers are having a difficult time finding skilled laborers, and this is a trend over time about the single most important problem. And we can see taxes is this thicker gray line, and that kind of dropped off. That's which would be consistent with the lower tax rate, so that dropped off. The sales number has come down as a probability, a percent of firms saying that that is an issue. But the one number that has trended upwards here is this light thin gray line here, and that's the labor quality that has picked up. So that's a problem that they're showing inside of these small firms. In fact, this is up close to 22% of firms saying that labor quality is one of the issues that they're dealing with. And then we look at prices, and this is where inflation comes into play. These are prices, and these are the planned increases in prices. So net increase, we can see this planned is continuing up here, and also the thick line is the actual prices, and they've ticked up. So that's something to keep an eye on when we think about inflation. We're not seeing right now this big push to rapid inflation, but we do start to see numbers start to pick up. And we've seen that in some of the items that came out last week, as in the PPI and the CPI. So with the PPI index, overall, you can see we're up month over month, 0.3%. So just a slight increase of where we were in February, and the core was up 0.3 as well. When we're looking at year over year, in this number, we're up 3% on the straight PPI and 2.7% on the core. So we saw some increase here when we're looking at these numbers. And in fact, we see that both the PPI and the core PPI month over month were up above their estimates. or their consensus numbers. So we saw a little bit of inflation, but again, nothing that is really driving this rapid increase in prices. When we look at the consumer price index, we see kind of a different picture, where in March we saw the CPI actually decline by 0.1% after it increased in February by 0.2 and in January by 0.5. So overall, we've seen this deceleration in the prices. And a lot of that came in terms of energy, there at coming down 2.8% month over month for March. When we're looking at that core number, less food and energy, you can see that was actually positive at 0.2%. So that matched where we were back in February. Year over year, we saw it up 2.4 overall CPI, and the core number at 2.1. So we saw changes, increases when we look at February year over year number, and for the core and for the total. So you went from February 2.2 in the total CPI up to 2.4, and then we went from a 1.8 for the core number of CPI up to a 2.1. So we did have increases, but they basically in those year-over-year changes met the expectations. Then when we flip from the PPI and the consumer price index, and we look at the Atlanta Fed's business inflation expectation index, what we saw is over the past couple of months is this continual increase in the expectation a year ahead as far as where inflation is going to be. And you can see here we're now at a 2.3% inflation. So it will be interesting as we move throughout 2018 to see if this expectation index kind of changes at all. But we can see, even going back to history, going back to 2012, we're at that high level. That's what we have for you this week in terms of the inflation and the small business index. We look forward to seeing you back here next week as we explore more topics and more releases that come out in the economic environment. Have a great week, everyone.